What's going on, everybody? Dylan Manfrey on hand for the Sport Profile. Back again like I never left. I'm here with SNY's Marino. So how are you doing today? How have you been handling all of this? And I saw you back in the studio recently. So how did it feel to be back there?
It's been a whirlwind. I think I'm a lot better now that I am back in the studio, even though it's a little different and it's a little bit harder in some ways just to adjust to different safety protocols. It's all a good thing. It's all positive. I'm really happy to be back. But I just missed it a lot. I was doing a lot of segments from home, but it's just not quite the same as being there and being around my coworkers and of course at a social distance spacing situation and wearing masks, except for when I go inside the actual studio, then I can take my mask off and do a TV show. But I think like everybody else, I probably struggled a little bit during the time that we weren't having live sports and we were cooped up, and I wasn't as busy as I normally would. And I'm somebody that kind of thrives on just like being busy and doing my job.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I always need to have like something to just, I guess, feel productive, if you will. What was your last bit of normalcy, if you will? So let's go back to like March 11th, March 12th. That's when all like the sports league shut down. What were you doing that day, and how did you react to the news that you heard?
All right. So the weekend prior to that was the American Athletic Conference tournament for women's basketball, and I was covering UConn in the tournament. They won the whole thing. Yeah. And that was on, I think a Monday was the final. And at the time we were really cognizant of COVID-19 becoming a bigger issue. But obviously the tournament still went on. I remember there being, antibacterial hand sanitizer everywhere. Yeah. And I remember being cognizant of not wanting to be close to people and kind of keeping to myself in my hotel room. Mm-hmm. Then I had off that Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday would have been the start for me of covering the Big East men's basketball tournament at Madison Square Garden. And I remember waking up that morning to the news that Rudy Gobert had tested positive for COVID from the Utah Jazz. And I knew that the Jazz had played the Knicks not that long prior to that. So I was definitely nervous about the idea of going to Madison Square Garden to cover the Big East tournament. And one of my colleagues, Janae Coakley, actually had gone to Madison Square Garden that day. Because if you recall, the Big East tournament, actually they started playing it.
I think they canceled like at halftime or something, right?
Correct. So they were like basically the last men's conference to back out of playing their tournament. And so she had actually gone there and then they cut it short. And so I pretty knew that I wasn't going to have to go there that night to cover it. And then that weekend, like you said, that weekend of like March 12th or so, we were thrust into the shutdown. Yeah.
Wow. I remember being at the MAC tournament in Atlantic City, March 11th and 12th. We were supposed to be there until the 14th, but then we canceled and ended up being like the second to last college basketball game on American soil for whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just remember my Twitter feed like blowing up saying like that this is going to be over. Like, what was your Twitter feed like almost? Like, were you seeing like all these things going on?
Of course.
Like, why are we still here?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of locked into Twitter a lot and sometimes more than I should be. So, like sometimes I need to turn it off and like, wind down and go to bed. But I just remember following it very closely because I was concerned from a work standpoint, just like everyone. Sure. And I remember thinking in the morning, I was hearing of all the more and more cancellations, like a domino effect. And I was like, I was almost certain the Big East would also cancel. I was a little surprised that They even started playing it, but it was just such mayhem. You know, everyone was doing the best they could with the information at hand and trying to make decisions as fast as they could. And SNY in particular had been planning to sort of test out all of their work from home situations
Really?
like the following week. And this actually made it go a little bit faster, where I'm pretty sure like that Friday was probably their last in studio show for a while.
Wow. How is it adjusting to, like, you know, at home studio, if you will? Because like I saw like a bunch of people, like, you know, fiddling to make live shots, have a nice backdrop, you know, the typical bookshelf, couple photos of family, couple bats, maybe memorabilia.
Well,
What did yours look like?
As you can see, this is pretty much has been my setup now since I moved. I made a move in the middle of the pandemic.
Really?
I think it was May 1st. So initially, March and April, I figured out my setup in my old apartment and had some help from my boyfriend, actually, because he, you know, has some lighting equipment and kind of would help me like frame up the shot. And I have a tripod. I use my phone, which is what I'm using right now.
Right.
But to me, it's like very important aesthetically just to have a background that is clean. Like I think my background right now could be better. It could be more interesting, but I'd rather have it, you know, a blank canvas than super busy and crazy. But my initial background at my old place was pretty good. Like you said, it had the bookshelf, which makes it, I think, visually more interesting. But it's so funny, the limitations that we have based on technology, because when I tried to go into my bedroom when I moved, it was too far from my router for my internet. So it just wasn't working as cleanly. So it's like all these funny things that we have to work on, right? You know, the angle, the lighting, the internet connection, the audio.
I'm sure it was all like really hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, it's something to take into consideration and figure out and make sure it's good. But if that's, you know, it's nothing to complain about for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure now it's like, you know, we've all toughed it out, and you know, you're back in the studio now. What was it like just being back in there for the first time? Did it feel real almost?
Yeah, it was strange. At first, leading up to it, I was a little anxious because I was like, okay, how is this going to work? The first few shows we did, it was prior to live baseball games returning. So we had a little leeway where we didn't have to do everything live, and I could get used to things like going and doing my own makeup and miking myself up, because that's usually something we have help with, and it usually goes by really fast. But depending, that could take me a little longer than usual. And I was concerned about just like, okay, when we're trying to scramble and put a show together and I'm about to be live on the air, just making sure everything was ready and that I was able to do everything on my own. And not that I hadn't like mic'd myself up before, but it's a little different. Sports Night on SNY is a show where I'm standing up a lot, I'm moving around a lot. So you really need to make sure that the mic is secure and your IFB is secure. And you obviously don't want it to be showing. You want it to look professional. So those are just little things that I was concerned about. And then, you know, figuring out how I was going to transport in. I live in Jersey, SNY is in downtown Manhattan. So I've been taking the PATH train, which has been fine. Occasionally I take Ubers, but like, you know, it's just like that nervous energy about like wearing masks.
Right. I know it.
Who's around you and whatnot. But then in the studio, everyone's great. Everyone's wearing their masks. Everyone, like all of our stations, our workstations are far apart. We have all kinds of rules and things that they put in place to ensure our safety.
Yeah. So you feel comfortable, you know, being there now?
Yeah, definitely. And I've gotten more used to the routine. We started having live baseball games again, and we started doing all the live shows. And so I kind of know how much time I need for everything. And I lean on my producers a lot, and our stage managers and things like that, director, our jib operator, like all of those people I really ask them to make sure everything looks good, everything sounds good.
Sure.
So that helps a lot too.
What made you want to become an on-air reporter? There's so many tracks you can take in like, journalism and communications, but what about being on air appealed to you most?
Well, I started out being interested in writing.
Mm.
I think more than anything, I'm a storyteller. And when I was in high school, I took a journalism class and basically fell in love with it. I became like an editor for my school paper, and I would write articles all the time. And my favorite part of that whole process was interviewing, even though it wasn't on camera or on air, going and finding the right person to tell the story, and having questions in mind and researching and then being face to face with them and just having a conversation was what I loved.
Right.
And then, take a step further, going into college, I pretty much knew I wanted to study journalism. And then I think because I liked that aspect so much, where I was in front of people and just being a people person.
Yeah.
And because I liked public speaking, and I had no issue sort of presenting myself.
Right.
I think that's what made me gravitate toward broadcast. And so I actually, I started at a community college, Sussex County Community, and they had a really good college TV and radio station.
Mm.
And that's kind of where I first dipped my toes into it. And I also did, I remember my first semester of college, I did local sports writing for a paper called the New Jersey Herald. And that just kind of got me a great taste of it. I was writing a couple articles a week. And I think it was storytelling first, and then sort of my, I don't know if you would even call it like skills. It was partly my skill set and partly just sort of my personality that led me to go the broadcast route.
And I'm sure you've developed like your confidence, over the years, because I feel like that's something a lot of people will struggle with, myself included, if you're going like on air to do something. So what's a way, I guess you've developed your confidence over the years?
Well, I think you have to have a certain amount of confidence innately.
Sure.
In other words, I think if you're the type of person that it might sound awkward to go up to random people and approach them and introduce yourself and ask questions. If that makes you squirm, then it's probably not the right profession for you. Right. And I learned that pretty early on, like I said, when I was doing the New Jersey Herald stuff, because I'll be honest, most of the time I would be, on the sideline or whatever. And I covered everything at the time, football games, volleyball games, tennis matches. I mean, anything that I could do. But I always feel like, the coaches would get caught off guard, oh, who is this? And you have to be able to kind of present yourself and say, hey, can I ask you a couple questions for the Herald and everything. So you, like I said, you have to be outgoing, I think, to start, but that doesn't mean you can't, start at a certain, spot and then grow. And I think, my confidence has grown in different ways over the years, and it just depends on the type of experience. I think I always had what I call that reporter instinct, where you're at you're in a situation, you're in the field, and you have to make split-second decisions, and you really have to find a way to be in the right place at the right time. I think that's what people don't realize. When you're a reporter, it's not like the coaches just walk up to you. You have to really seek people out, and you have to scheme and plan and figure out, how am I going to get in front of this person and get that quote that I need, or get that soundbite that I need. So that's part of it. And then everything else just comes from experience. It's actually a combination of experience and preparation. I think the more prepared I am for anything, the more confident I am. And then that coupled with, okay, I've done some semblance of this before, gives you the confidence to do what you need to do.
Is there a point in your preparation where you feel like comfortable enough to be like, all right, I've written all I need to do for this report. I don't need to do any more. I'm able to just go on air, like cool, calm, collected, and deliver my report to a national audience?
I would say there's different things. There's a reporting aspect, like where, for instance, when I'm doing sideline for UConn basketball, and I'm doing like a stand-up, that to me is first establishing what exactly the report is on, making sure I have enough information to round it out. So I might have notes on all these different things, and then what sticks out to me that I have enough to share, and that's sort of newsworthy or that's interesting enough to share, and then packaging it into a format that works for that. So those reports might only be like 45 seconds or less. So it's a matter of being concise. And as you know from writing any sort of journalism, being concise is extremely important.
Absolutely.
And because with writing, obviously you want to grab the person's attention right away, and you want to keep it. So you can't be, depending on, if it's a magazine article, that's something different, but something news, like keeping your audience engaged is very important. And then with television, time constraints are constant, especially live TV. So it's like, really have to learn to share what's most important and share it basically by getting the most information out with using the least amount of words. And that's something I learned early on. I learned that in getting the most info out with the least amount of words, but it's
easier said than done.
You apply it differently in different settings.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
I'm having a conversation with you, and I'm not trying to be concise. I'm not like that's the thing. I'm a big fan of conversation, and some formats aren't really conducive to that. But I think podcasts are just blowing up because of that natural, like, free flowing conversation, which I think is fun and keeps everyone feeling like they're part of it. But you were asking me about preparedness, and the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, like, aside from reporting, if I do any sort of like analysis, and that's how I started at SNY. Like, I would go on like a panel show, and we would have a topic, and I would give my take on it.
Yeah.
And so whatever the topic is, there's usually a moment where a light bulb will pop on for me, where like, I know what the topic is. I have a general understanding of it just from my day-to-day, following sports and making sure I'm well-read and well-informed in general. And when I get to the topic and I really start diving into it, usually there's something that, like I said, jumps out at me where it clicks, and I'm like, okay, this is really what I think about it and why, and this is what I feel. And so I think it's different for everybody, but I would, like, when I would prepare for shows, and still now when I prepare for segments, sometimes I'll be on the fence about how I feel about something, and then I'll see a certain detail that'll like kind of seal it for me as to how I feel about it and why that's valid.
Yeah, definitely. What's been like, your most memorable interaction, either with an athlete, coach, or whomever throughout your career?
There's been a lot. And they sort of blend together over. But I would say most recently, the interactions that I get to have with Gino Auriemma, one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Yeah.
I always feel like when I'm around him, whether it's I'm interviewing him right after the game or doing a sit down interview or even just at a shoot around watching what he does, I'm always learning something, and just respect him a whole lot. And I think he has a really great sense of humor too, which makes it fun to cover.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple funny ones. Like, I remember, I think it was last year. Was it last year? Anyway, when, Yes. Okay. Now I remember. Okay. So it was last year. Pat Shurmur was still the coach of the Giants.
Okay.
It was leading into the season, and it was like a training camp practice I was at. Um, everyone was sort of buzzing about Daniel Jones, even though Eli Manning was still the quarterback. But like, you know what it was? DJ. I call him DJ. He had like he had a couple like really good preseason games, right? So people were like buzzing about him.
Yeah.
And so I asked Coach Shurmur, like it was like one of those scrums, and I just was like, so DJ, blah, 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 blah. And he looks at me and goes, DJ. And I go, yeah, Daniel Jones. And he's like, okay. Like he didn't like, I don't know if he was just playing coy or if he hadn't heard anyone refer to him.
Funny.
But like, he just kind of like did a double take, but then he like answered the question. And then after everyone like broke out of the scrum, he kind of like gave me a double taking, was like, DJ, okay. Like that is a ring to it.
Right, that's sick.
So I don't know, like that's something that's so small. Like that's not even something you would see on the air, but like little interactions like that, I think are really cool. I remember like this is just randomly coming to my mind, but when I back in radio before I even started at SNY, and I was doing some stuff for a channel there called Sirius XM NBA Radio, and I got a credential to go to a Warriors practice. They were in town to play the Knicks, and I went to their practice at the Players Association gym, and like I just bumped into Steve Kerr, and I randomly was like, hi, like I'm Maria Marino. Like I just like randomly introduced myself, and he was just like, looked at me like, who are you? Like what, whatever. But like, he like shook my hand and he was like super nice, but it's weird. Like, you know, sometimes you're just in a situation and you just like have this gut reaction and you're like, well, you know, I might have like come off as like, who knows what, silly or whatever, but you know, I myself, and who knows if he would remember, but then it kind of came full circle. He's really great. I remember I got asked to cover a Warriors Knicks game for SNY. And this is before I was hired there full time, but I asked a question in a scrum as well, and he gave a really good answer. He's just really like smart and thoughtful.
Awesome.
And I'm going to say one more, because I know I'm going off on long tangents, but one of the other things I used to love doing when I was with SiriusXM is I think there were 2 or 3 years in a row where I did what was called like the rookie photo shoot, and it was basically like a media day for all of the NBA rookies. Okay. And so it's kind of cool because I can look at a certain NBA team and there's probably somebody on there that I've interviewed at some point. Okay. Because last like few years I've interviewed so many of these rookies, and just briefly, like it'd be like a minute or 2 minutes. Sure. But like we did a live interview with Ben Simmons at the time, and that was on our Facebook page, and it was really cool because like it's the best time in my opinion to like interview these NBA players, because it's before they like blow up and get like insane popular, and
well, people know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was neat and really fun to do. I'm sure I could think of more.
No, that's all like, you know, really cool. And it makes me think of some of like, you know, my like memorable interactions, I guess. You know, so did you always want to, you know, cover sports when you were getting into journalism? Like, was sports always, you know, the main route for you?
Not necessarily. I always liked sports, but I
know you said like you played basketball for a little bit, so.
I did, yeah, in high school. And, you know, growing up, my dad was a big Giants fan. My older siblings were actually big Duke basketball fans, so I liked college ball a lot.
Sweet.
And I was, you know, I liked the Yankees, but I wasn't like an obsessive fan. I would say I was like really into the Giants and really into Duke. Mm-hmm. But besides that, it was kind of more of a relaxed fandom. And then, you know, I was pretty athletic, but never was trying to pursue sports at like a higher level.
Yeah.
When I got to the point where I was trying to figure out what to do professionally, I didn't see sports as honestly like a viable option. I thought it was like really far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I remember certain things, like I said, like the sports reporting for the Herald, or there are a couple other local things I did. There was like this local TV station up by where I grew up that I did like high school sports. Certain things were kind of pointing me in that direction, but I still wasn't sure about it.
Yeah.
And it took me a few years after I graduated college to kind of find my way back to sports. I did some other stuff. I did like lifestyle related content where I was doing a lot of blogs and shooting and editing video and things like that for this resort. It was like a golf spa hotel resort. So that was interesting, like learning that side of it. And then I went into local news, reporting and anchoring for a radio station. And then I think actually it was the main like driving force behind the sports thing was this podcast that a couple of buddies of mine had started that I had went to high school with.
Yeah.
And they come on, and then it turned into like this weekly thing, and I enjoyed it so much. And then I started listening to sports radio constantly, and then I became obsessed with it. And then I got an update anchor job at Sirius XM in the sports department.
Yeah.
And that just opened everything up. And then I was like, wow, okay, I can really like zero in on the sports niche now.
You know, a lot of people, I guess, downplay the sports media industry. That, you know, they say like it's shrinking by the day. I'm wondering if you really subscribe to that belief, because, you know, at least for me, I always see on my Twitter feed people announcing what they're doing for the upcoming whenever. So it seems to me that it's like, it's not impossible. It might be difficult, but it's not impossible. So I want to know like what your experience on that is.
I think anything is going to have its challenges. I do think media in general is extremely challenging and competitive, and all those like scary things that you hear about it. And it's true. I mean, it's true. I didn't get a job until I was 29 years old, basically. You know, I didn't have benefits until then. I had, you know, a lot of low paying jobs and pretty awful hours for a long time. But, you know, I still liked what I was doing.
Right.
It was certainly hard, and it was certainly a grind. But I think it's not impossible. I think anything that anyone wants to kind of figure out and do, it's all about what you're willing to, I don't know if sacrifice is the right word, but just balance. Like,
True.
You know, you have to prioritize what's most important to you. And I think everybody has different things. Like, you know, for some people, maybe going beyond just like living paycheck to paycheck and not having a secure situation, maybe that's more of a priority. But, you know, everybody's different. Like, that's right. If I could give one piece of advice about this like career path or this industry, is that there is no path. There is no blueprint. Like, that's what you have to get comfortable with. It's like, I have to kind of figure out and finagle a way to get one step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And
Sure.
you just have to be like okay with the uncertainty, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
And that's not for everybody. Like, it's just not. And that's totally cool. Like I know a lot of people that I worked with, you know, when I was interning or when I started in radio, and like certain people that just, they didn't want to do it anymore. Like their heart wasn't in it. It was too much of a grind, or just not setting them up financially where they wanted to be. And so all of those things you have to weigh out, and you'll weigh out as your life sort of unfolds, and you weigh things as they come. And that's always how I've sort of approached it. And I had no idea that I was going to end up finding a way to work on the TV side. I thought that it was always a dream, but you know, I know that I was going to be doing on camera stuff until it was kind of there in front of me.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? It's
No,
like,
it definitely does. It definitely does.
but then again, if I had been, say, a little older at the time, or it's like timing is really everything when it comes to like weighing whatever opportunity it is and like weighing your priorities.
Sure, because a 20-year-old's priorities are going to be different than like person who's like
Sure.
5, 27, 28.
Right. Right.
6.
And I was lucky too, because I found, like, for instance, I found an apartment that was like really cheap. Like, whereas if I didn't find that, I could have afforded to be doing all these part-time jobs in Manhattan and freelancing and running around a different
dream. But that's a dream though for some people.
Yeah. And it was, and it was cool. It was cool for me. And I was definitely happy about that.
Right.
But it's like, man, sometimes things fall into place and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to just scrounge and like.
It takes a lot of trust.
But yeah, and it's just different for everybody.
Yeah. How have you measured your own success over the course of your career?
Oh, that's tough. I don't. Speaking of,
do you feel like you're your own biggest critic?
Yes, I am. I would say I am my own biggest critic, and I think, to be honest, a lot of successful people or people that I would view as successful are that way. Mm-hmm. Because I just think you need that second gear to push yourself to like be better or to put in the extra, just take that extra step to be a little crisper, a little sharper, a little more prepared.
Yeah.
So yes, but it's weird. Like even before I got the SNY gig, I felt like I was successful, even though I was flat broke. And I mean like flat broke. I felt like, I don't know. I was just like, I'll be fine. Like once I get the rent paid, I'll be fine. Like,
right.
So I was still, I felt strangely happy. Even though I had no idea where I was going from there, and had no idea how I was going to make it work in the long term. I was just trying to focus on day to day doing my best. And
right.
I was comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I was successful in that time.
$1 million quality right there.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I felt successful, even when I was, still working in radio and, multiple jobs like that, and getting to smart, accomplished people at like Fantasy Sports Network is another, was kind of like my first regular, like on camera gig.
Yeah.
And I just learned so much, and I was just eating that up. I was eating all that up.
Sure. What would, I'm 20 years old right now. I have 2 years of college left. What would you tell your 20-year-old self, based on your experiences now? What advice would you give to 20-year-old Maria?
I guess I would tell 20-year-old Maria, what I would tell her? I would say not to rule out the sports thing, right? Because I really think once I figured out that that's what I was passionate about, I almost had to play catch up. I would spend hours on hours reading everything I could find and researching, because my knowledge wasn't anywhere close to some of the people that were working next to me that had been in the business for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I felt like I needed to be able to hang with them in conversation, be able to understand context. And so I really I just dove so deep into, I would spend so much time figuring everything out and watching every game I possibly could. Anytime I had to do, throw a documentary on, I would throw it on. I would just I just felt like my knowledge and my overall context was behind. Mm-hmm. And so like, had I known that the sports thing was where I would end up, all those years, like when I was in college where I was casually following, I would have been following extremely closely. And that would have saved me a lot of work on the back end to feel as though I belonged and feel as though my knowledge was sort of, I could measure it against anyone. But I feel a lot better now. And I still feel, I'm just the type of person I like to research and make sure that I have the facts straight.
Of course.
Yeah, but other than that, I think I followed, as far as my career goes, it's not like I've done things where like I wish I didn't do it. I thought was a good idea at the time.
Worked out for the best.
So far, so good, I guess I would say.
How did you feel when you, I guess, first got that SNY job? You know, because you said you were, you know, to use your words, dead broke.
Yes.
You know, living paycheck to paycheck sometimes. You know, so how did you feel when you got that job?
So I remember when they first reached out to me, I was excited, but at the time I wasn't overly optimistic because I had
reached out to you first.
Yes. Someone from their kind of like their programming and production me. And like I said, I was excited, but I was trying to temper expectations because I had a few instances where I had interviews or auditions or things that I thought went really, really well and then didn't pan out.
Right.
I had a number of those actually. And so I was like, okay, we'll see what this is. And I didn't believe it until it was like actually happening. So until I got the call, like, hey, we want you to come on these days on a show. And I hung up the phone and I just like was so alone in my apartment. And I was just like, yes. Like I was just so excited and like freaking out. And I was just smiling from ear to ear and like celebrating. But then I got really nervous because then I was like, oh my God, I have to like really perform and I have to do a good job and execute because this is not over, you know? And so then from then on, like, it was like, okay, here's the chance, here's the opportunity, now execute it and do a good job and show your worth kind of thing. So then it turned into like study mode all the time.
Sure.
I've been booked for a show, which was pretty regular. Like they had me on pretty much every week, like 1 or 2 days a week, or, you know, just pretty often, like often enough where it was like, okay, I got to a routine with it and talking about the preparation, making sure I was ready to go. And then they asked me to do different roles throughout the network, whether it be some field reporting stuff, some sideline reporting, hosting and anchoring, as opposed to doing analysis, and like everything that asked me to do, I said yes. I didn't want, and there's certainly a point in your career when you'll look at something and say that doesn't feel right, and you should say no. Like I don't think you should say yes to everything blindly.
Right.
But I think you have to look at certain things that are being offered to you and understand that sometimes if you say no, it's someone else's to grab. And so with that in particular, with SNY, I really wanted to be available. I really wanted to do anything and everything I could to take anything that they would give me. And then I was working there about 9 months and then got a full-time offer.
Wow. Who's the first person you called or, you know, told that information to when you got the offer?
I think it was my dad. I think I called my dad right away and told him that I got that offer because he was just a huge influencer for me, and he was always so supportive of my career. He would listen to everything I did. I mean, when I was on like the local news radio station, he would listen to my newscasts, and he would watch when I was on my community college like broadcast or whatever. He would throw that on, and every single step he was watching and listening and would talk to me about it. And he is somebody that like follows sports media a lot, so he knows a lot of the he could relate to what I was doing. And so I just felt like he understood everything that I was trying to do, and he never discouraged me. And so he was like the first call, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember like that afternoon, I don't even know if my mom was with him or what, but like I told my mom, I told my sister, I told my boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
all in that evening, kind of, that they had actually, you know, extended that offer. So
Yeah.
it was a very nice day. It was a good day.
I'm sure. My next question was going to be, who's your hero? Who's your biggest inspiration? And, you just talked so highly of your dad. So I'm wondering if that's your answer to that question.
Yeah, there's a number of different ones. I think in my personal life, certainly my parents are two people I look up to a ton, and I'm one of 5 siblings, and I admire and respect and look up to all my siblings for reasons. And
oldest, youngest, middle?
I'm the second youngest, but they all have kids. And so I them sort of in a different light, because they are walking this earth with a different purpose than I am.
Yeah.
Children, and they're raising those kids. And I just respect that a lot. I respect their work ethic.
Of course.
Even though like what I do in my daily life is just so radically different from them.
Yeah.
I respect them a ton. And then there's certain people in the industry that I idolize, of course. I've learned to idolize the people in the industry that are genuinely good people despite their massive success. So a couple of mine are Michael Kay, Mike Breen, Burkhart, and Chris Carlin. And all of them, as massively huge as they are stardom wise, have all been kind to me, have all extended advice to me, have all taken the time to ask about me personally. And just that, to me, I think that's incredible. And that's who I want to be, because I want to be mindful of I want to be mindful of being kind to others, and of
course
extending whatever hand that I can, and also being great as a performer.
Absolutely.
Which all are. So I would say those guys. And then there are certain people that I used to watch. Like I remember like when Kim Jones was the reporter for the Yankees, and she was the first reporter that I looked at that I was like, wow, she's really sharp and like really knows her stuff. And I was really impressed with her delivery.
Yeah.
I felt that way too about like Holly Rowe, Ali LaForce, phenomenal on sideline. And then I started to also really, like, I idolize a lot of basketball analysts, females in particular. Tara Lawson is one of the most knowledgeable basketball minds that I've heard, and, paid off. She was obviously with the Celtics this past year and just got the head women's basketball coach at Duke. Doris Burke. And she's another one, like, who, I was to get on a phone call with, and was happy to take time to give me, her 2 cents on things. And so there's a lot of people. There's a lot out there. Linda Cohn is another one.
Another goat.
And she used to host shows on Sirius XM, and she would shout me out like when I would come in and do the updates, which was great.
Really?
Tina Serpino is another like great professional, always helpful, always kind, nice, and also tremendously good at her job. Deserves every bit of success she's been having. And so there's so many. I hope I haven't left out any major ones, but there's a lot out there.
Yeah. I feel compelled to just ask this question too. You named so many prominent women in sports media. So what can, I guess, society do to make the sports media industry, even though it is a male-dominated industry, what can people do to make it more inclusive, for women in sports? Because it's so important to just uplift people's voices and make sure everybody has, an equal opportunity.
I think that's a really important question. As far as women in sports, both on the athlete side and on the media side.
Yeah. I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah. It comes down to decision makers. It comes down to everyone working behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people at the top need to trickle down a diverse perspective about what a woman might think or feel about a certain thing, what a woman might bring to the table that's different than what a man could bring to the table. And I don't mean one's better than the other. I just mean different. I think diversity overall just makes everything stronger.
Absolutely.
Different perspectives at the table. You can see things from more angles. And then when that happens, you can be more thorough and you can just be better at your job as a team, putting out the best product. And that doesn't just go for gender, that goes for, everything.
Yeah.
Different races, different creeds. And absolutely. I just think that there's been long-standing habits that have happened or have been developed, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes subconsciously, that require a different viewpoint in order to identify. And so I think that sometimes requires a bit of open-mindedness. And I think a lot of it has to do with education as well. And there's a lot more eye-opening situations that young girls and young women are put in now that make it a dream that they can realize, that maybe they before or didn't see before or thought it was too far-fetched. And I think as far as sports are concerned, there's certainly studies out there that show that young girls who get involved in sports are successful for a number of reasons, and not just in sports media, but in business and whatnot. Yeah. There's links to success in sports and confidence and all sorts of things. So, I just I don't. It's such a hard thing for me to quantify.
It's a broad topic.
Yeah, I just think that those that have the power to make the decisions need to be aware of the power that they hold, and just think of things a little differently than they have before. And I think having a couple more, female producers and a couple more female anything will help that diversity be more well-rounded. And I do think that's happening. I really do think that there's a ton of respect in the workplace, and there's certainly challenges, and there have been a lot of challenges. And so I don't want to downplay that, but I also feel good about where things are going. Yeah. And yeah, I think there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because of, I guess this generation, being so cognizant of, equal opportunities for everybody, no matter what, race, gender, creed, religion you are, do you think, I guess, the sports media industry in general is trending in the right direction?
Yes, I do. There's still work to be done.
Of course.
Don't get me.
Of course.
But I think when, a woman like myself shows up at a job and is the only woman in the room full of men, I think it helps when I just hope that my hard work shines through. I hope that my performance backs up things way better than I could ever express
Yeah.
here via words. You know, I think just seeing that example and seeing examples of other women do it, and just seeing more and more of that gives people the just the knowledge that, hey, like, she is competent, she is just as good or just as diligent as anybody else. And it's just like all these little things add up to create just an environment that's more female friendly.
Absolutely. So I think that's all, I have right now, but is there anything else, like, you want to add, like, on, your experience and your, your career, anything you want to share about yourself?
Well,
one more question I did have, and I like to ask this with, anybody I'm interviewing, because I feel like it's such a, unique question that not everybody's asked a lot. What's something you like or admire about yourself?
Oh, something more about myself. That's tough. I already feel as though I'm talking so much about myself, but I think what I admire about myself is that I care deeply about my craft. I care
Sure.
deeply about the product that's being displayed.
Mm-hmm.
Care deeply about doing what I believe is the right thing. And sometimes it's not easy to do. And sometimes I just want to do something that's more minimum, but I can't.
Yeah.
And it consumes me, and sometimes it keeps me up at night. But I know that I have to do it, and feel responsible, and I feel a duty to cover what I can cover in a way that has some small influence on whatever audience I can muster.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's about the story. It's about the athlete in a lot of cases, and sharing, being a voice for them,
Yeah.
a voice for especially groups that I think are underrepresented or underappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't explain. I just feel that. And so yeah, I would just say I care. That's the thing that I like about myself.
That's fantastic. So, I didn't mean to cut you off before, but, like, was there anything else, like, you wanted to add?
No, I think that's a good end.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me for me to be able to share your story and for you to come on. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Dylan.